Okay, so this week's video was inspired by a Twitter survey about what motivated teachers to go into teaching. Was it teaching a subject or teaching children? Unsurprisingly, I think the vast majority of primary school teachers said that they went into teaching for the children, they wanted to teach children. And the majority of secondary teachers who responded, their preference was subject. They went into teaching because of a love of their subject, and they were motivated to teach their subject. What that got me thinking about was the difficulties that places on SENCOs in the secondary sector. In the primary sector, if you can start with the assumption that you've got all these teachers who just want to make learning fun and enjoyable and accessible for children, then it's going to be easier to do the job of getting children, finding out if children have got special needs and getting those strategies in place. You're going to be with the child for a lot more of the time, therefore you'll know your children really well, which makes it much easier to spot if there's something that's not quite right or there's a bit of a mismatch. They always seem to be wandering around, is there a reason why they can't sit still? Is there a reason why they're different in their spoken work and their written work? You're seeing it all the time. You get to know the child. They seem a bit anxious, whatever it is. It's harder for a child to disappear in the primary sector. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, and there are also teachers who don't believe that there's a reason for this behaviour other than just annoyance, the child's being annoying, and there will always be teachers that we need to work harder on to get them to appreciate that strategies are needed, so I get that, but in the primary sector generally it is easier in that sense. In the secondary sector there are a few reasons why it can be harder. One is that yes, there are teachers who are there because they're passionate about their subject and that's what their focus is on. But there are also those who see a child maybe for an hour a week, along with, especially for, there's certain subjects where you teach a lot of different children for just an hour a week. And that can make it very hard to get to know each child. I get it. I've worked in both sectors. I fully understand it. So it can be harder to notice if there's something wrong or there's a mismatch if you don't really see the children that often. So that's one of the issues. Also, there's such a strong emphasis on data in secondary schools, and it can be that if you've got say for example you've got a very intelligent child and they're doing well enough in all the tests and exams and what have you, you may not realise that there's actually a learning need because it's being masked. They could be performing even higher if their learning need were being met, but you may not notice it because actually the results are fine, there's no issue. I've taught children like that where the intellect is so high that they've masked a learning difficulty. There's one child where they turned out to be very dyspraxic and everything was fine until there was a teacher who was really upsetting this child, and this child was getting stressed. The marks started to go down, did some assessments just to have an excuse, if you like, to spend the time with the child. This is on the mother's request. It turned out the child was dyspraxic. We had various interventions put in place and everything, he's doing incredibly well. But the stress levels, when it wasn't working, was enough to bring out the difficulties and to accentuate them so that all the things that he'd been masking because of his intellect and his coping strategies, they'd all disappeared because he was so stressed. I know with my own dyslexia that when I'm stressed, I can't spell, I can't get my words out, I forget what I'm meant to be doing, and it just goes wrong. So it's important to be aware that just because someone's scoring well doesn't mean they couldn't be scoring better. They could be doing better. So one of the things we can look at, so I'm looking at spotting the signs. How do we spot the signs for somebody who's got some form of learning needs, special educational needs or disability? So it could be the child who's either very quiet in class or very noisy in class. The noisy one, not enough to be a real behaviour issue, but just enough to be a bit of a class clown, cause a bit of a distraction, get the teacher off topic, all that sort of stuff. Avoidance strategies. Or you get the child, like I was at school, who just didn't want to be noticed because I felt stupid most of the time, because everyone else could do things quickly and easily. I didn't put my hand up very often in class because then they'd notice if you didn't, either if you got it wrong, or they'd just notice you, full stop. If you don't want to be noticed, you could be incredibly conscientious like I was. Always gave my homework in on time, never late with homework. The teacher wouldn't know that I'd been up till gone midnight doing my homework. All I knew is my friends did it quickly, I did it slowly, I must be stupid. I got good marks, but that's because I was so conscientious, because it's a way of disappearing. So the quiet ones, please notice them, please ask about them. The best teachers do. You don't forget your best teachers. Mrs. Hurley, she was wonderful. Without her I wouldn't have been an English teacher. Find those good teachers, so the good teachers will find the children. Okay. The other thing is there could be a mismatch between, say, written work and, this is an obvious one, written work and oral work. So a child in class is quick to answer, they know it, or they so obviously, and they ask really interesting questions and they've got it, and then you get a paragraph in for homework. Well, that could be the sign of something else. It could be a child who's had a meltdown when they got home because they're autistic and they've been working so hard at masking it during the day that they get home, have a meltdown, can't cope with the homework. It could be a child who's dyslexic and who has spent, or dyspraxic maybe, and has spent maybe 2 hours or 1 hour on this one little paragraph. Then they get told they're being lazy because they're not producing the work. Oh, I know you're capable of more than this. Yes, but maybe I'm capable of more than this when speaking about it, but not capable of more than this when writing it down. So if there's a child where there's a mismatch between their spoken work and their written work, for example, that's just one example, then talk to the Senko. Let's do some further investigation. Handwriting. My handwriting is appalling. I can write neatly. As a teacher, I have to write neatly. It takes me forever to write neatly. I can do it, but it takes forever. Partly the problem with writing neatly is you have to get your spelling correct. It's as simple as that. When I write in my normal quick writing, which is just for me, doesn't matter what the spelling is, doesn't matter how many, I'm looking here at my notes and I've got the word wondering. I've got 5 letters in that, but I know it says wondering because I wrote it, and I wrote it just a few minutes ago. So scrawling is a good way of masking your handwriting and your spelling so that people don't notice you spelling incorrectly, especially if, like me, really good in spelling tests, because they told me which words I needed to spell and I only needed to remember them till the end of the spelling test. In my regular work, my spelling is awful. So that's another thing. Untidy handwriting. It could be a sign of dyspraxia, dysgraphia, or it could be dyslexia. Okay, so be aware of the handwriting. The child who's always putting their hand up, can I go to the toilet? Had a child who always seemed to need the toilet during maths. Turned out they had a bit of dyscalculia, they were dyspraxic, all sorts of reasons why they weren't coping with maths, and so they needed the toilet in maths. So be aware if they're always needing the toilet. Somebody who's displaying what you might think of as dumb insolence. So a child who, when you tell them off, they just look at you blankly. I've known a few children like this. I'm thinking of 2 in particular. One was on the autistic spectrum. So the dumb insolence was the rabbit in the headlight freezing, and I don't know what to do, I'm being told off, or I'm being asked for something and I don't know the answer, and they just freeze. They can't cope, they just freeze. So it looks like they're being rude, so then they get told off for that, when actually they've not done anything wrong. They just couldn't cope with that particular situation. Another one was somebody who had situational or selective mutism, and she would want to speak. She'd be looking up at you because she wanted to speak, and if you knew her, you may be thinking, oh, she's trying to tell me something and can't, let's give her some pencil and paper. If you didn't know her, you might think, gosh, she's being rude, being really, I said hello, she ignored me. It could be that somebody has situational mutism. So these things that might look like one thing could be something else. The general, what we would call bad behaviour, you sort of like, oh God, their behaviour's appalling, it's driving me nuts. It could be somebody with autism or sensory needs. It could be that the light is making a slight buzzing noise, or that the pixels are slightly out on the computer or something, and it's driving that person to distraction. The noise, there could be a particular noise, it could be the temperature, all sorts of things. It could be the label in the back of their clothing is driving them nuts. And so they eventually explode. It could be speech and language. It could be that I don't understand what's being said around me. I don't understand. Explosion, meltdown. There's often a reason behind behaviour. It could be something's gone wrong at home. You don't know. If there's behaviour issues, it's not just about the pastoral team. Let the Senko know in case there's something behind that the Senko can support with. And the other thing I'm talking specifically, I'm thinking very much with the whole of this about secondary schools. The staff room is a great place to find out. If you've got a child who's there's just something niggling about them, talk to the other teachers. It could be that that child has no issues in certain subjects, and it could be that those subjects allow that child to move around the classroom, and that child actually has a bit of ADHD and they need to be on the move. It could be there's no writing in another lesson. It could be there's no reading in another lesson. It could be very much subject specific that the behaviours are happening in. So if there's a mismatch, not just in that child, what you see and what you get in from them, but between what you hear in the staff room from different teachers, let the Senko know. And if you're the form teacher, then one of your responsibilities is to know your children. So talk to the different subject teachers. And if you think that child's fine in form time, but what if they're not fine in maths? Or what if it's not automatically, well, it must be the maths teacher. It could be the subject, and it could be that there's a learning need that the subject is accentuating, if you like. So just look for these signs. There are loads more. The other thing I wanted to quickly share before I finish this one is a book that was recommended to me this week. It's called The Illustrated Guide to Dyslexia and Its Amazing People. And it just is so spot on. It has very few words, which I think is great. One of the things I love this page. I don't know if you can see it. So it shows how for the neurotypical child, you've got your ball, the goal, you can just straight line. But for someone whose brain is wired like mine, it's a bit like that. Ideas just bounce around all over the place. It says here, dyslexic thinking is like a pinball machine. Information bounces around your brain and can lead to some winning ideas. Great ideas, but pulling them all together can take forever. So there are positive things about these learning needs. I always say that. There are great things that can come out of them, but we do need to spot the signs. So the thing today is about making sure that we spot the signs if there's a need in our children. Thank you.